You know, we were talking earlier that in covering the presidential campaign leading up to the election, so often Joe Biden declared during the campaign that he saw himself as a bridge, not as anything else, to a new generation of Democratic leaders. And so I wanted to bring in Rahm Emanuel again tonight, former mayor of Chicago, former chief of staff for President Obama. And I'm curious, given what he proposed tonight and what you've witnessed in these first 100 days, Rahm, are we seeing a transitional president or more of a transformative one, taking, leaps, not steps?
Yeah, David, I would say it's not either or, it's both. I think the policies are transformational. I mean, when you think about it, and I've done this in Chicago, 4 years of additional education to a child's life, that's a quarter more, actually a third more for a child than we do today. And I've seen what free community college could do. Literally 84% of the kids that go to free community college in Chicago are the first ones in their family to ever go to college. That is transformational. On the other hand, I would think his own politics himself is transitional to another generation, creating a platform for them to succeed future. So I don't really see it as either or. I really do see it as something that's both of these. The one last thing I would say, you're still in a place in the first 100 days, the Republicans do not have the combination of the ability to demonize Joe Biden. They're trying to do it on policies. They're trying to do it, given up on doing it on him personally. And that has made him basically, he's got a lot of running room here.
I want to ask you about that, Chris Christie. Have they had a hard time sort of labeling President Biden? I mean, has he been too disciplined for Republicans? And on this notion, Lindsey Graham said, I think he's decided that his presidency is going to be big, transformational, and partisan.
Well, those who are speaking plainly haven't had a hard time defining him. Look, there's three things that the president didn't mention tonight in his speech that are in his bill. First, that he's now proposing that somebody who quits their job gets unemployment benefits for 75% of their salary if they quit their job, not laid off or fired. Second, he's proposed a huge new family business tax increase, where if we try to pass a business or a farm from one generation to the next, that there's going to be a huge tax increase that could very well necessitate them having to sell that business or sell that farm. Third, he has proposed a huge tax increase that will significantly destroy IRA, 401k, and 529 plan benefits for people to provide for their retirement and their children's education. You heard none of that in the feel-good talk tonight, but it's all there in the bill, everybody, and that is transformational. And I also believe it could be unifying, because if he in fact succeeds in doing those things, it will unify the middle class of this country against him.
Really interesting, Governor Christie. Thanks for that. Yvette Simpson, I want to bring you in on this as well, because I'm curious how progressives, given the fact that you gave President Biden a B tonight, where that puts the president in this. You know, Rahm was trying to explain that he's somewhere in the middle of being transformational, but also a calming presence for much of the country that doesn't want something as progressive as perhaps they're seeing in some of the policies proposed tonight. Where do you fall and where do progressives fall, do you think, tonight, given what they've heard?
You know, I think that Joe Biden is Joe Biden. I think there were places where, we expected him to fall short of where progressives expected, and that's a disappointment. With health care, the Affordable Care Act is not where most Americans are. We need a public option. We need a Medicare for all, and most Americans agree, and we expected him to fall short there. I talked a little bit earlier about the issue with criminal justice reform and the idea that he's still talking about good and bad apples and not talking about real systemic reform and not prepared to go all the way there. And we can talk about ending cash bail, legalizing marijuana, all of those things that didn't get talked about around criminal justice reform that progressives are pushing. He's not going far enough on climate. We've talked about that. We haven't talked about diplomacy and how he's talked about increasing the military budget rather than decreasing the military budget. And we know that's a major issue for progressives. So I would say halfway there, exactly where we expected him to be. We still need more.
All right, Yvette Simpson, our thanks to you as always. I want to bring in Cecilia Vega, our chief White House correspondent, because we were talking during the break that he did signal tonight saying Senator Kamala Harris and he had been meeting with Republican senators about infrastructure, at least having discussions. And he said there is room here for some debate, some going back and forth. And he actually spelled it out when it came to immigration, a willingness, it seemed, to break some points out.
Yeah, this is a big acknowledgement that he's not likely to get this overwhelming, sweeping immigration reform that he'd campaigned on. He said, let's end this existing war on immigration. But he's acknowledging that perhaps he might have better luck if we pull something as popular as protections for DACA recipients, dreamers, those young people who were brought to the country illegally as children. There is overwhelming political support in Congress around the country to give them. But there have been 11 attempts to pass protections for dreamers. They have all failed. There might be some appetite on Capitol Hill right now to pull dreamers out separately and pass that. Republicans may be willing to bend. There is a question, though, on whether Republicans will bend that much and give President Biden a victory on immigration, knowing that this is a huge weak spot for him going into the midterms. They know this is where he is weak, and they may not want to give him that victory.
Do they want to give up the issue going into the midterms? All right, Cecilia. Back now with the team here in New York, and we always think it's important to remember where the country is as they watch this unfold. So let's bring in Terry Moran for a closing thought tonight, because, Terry, we're still in the middle of this pandemic. It was just this week Joe Biden took off his mask and hoped for some sense of normalcy for everyone by the 4th of July.
That's right. The pandemic has exhausted people, David, as has this endless culture war, people fighting about what it means to be American, about identity. And President Biden's response to that is twofold. First, take off the mask and use government to try to make practical, pragmatic change for the better in people's lives. He's betting that that will calm the waters. The problem is those are all policy issues. Right now, those fights out there, they really aren't about policy. They are about identity. The Republican Party is unlikely to give many votes because it's a party that's ready to censure Liz Cheney because she recognizes the arithmetic of Joe Biden's win. He has an uphill climb with the country. What we heard tonight was an old-time populist, pragmatic agenda. The question is, does the newfangled identity politics on both sides trump that?
And did it land, Terry, with people so exhausted, as he said, at home?
And there's so many issues here, right? From the pandemic, you go to the epidemic of violence, and people just want life to return, and parents want schools to open. As Tim Scott said, our schools should have been open months ago, was his point. And as of April 7th, only 46% of public schools in this country are open full-time for in-person learning.
And you said there was one sentence, Martha, from Joe Biden?
It's never been a good bet to bet against America. And it still isn't, no matter what the divide is.
Why don't we all meet back here in another 100 days? There's plenty to talk about. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live, abcnews.com. Complete coverage on GMA first thing in the morning. And I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.